Hello again, and welcome to our video on programming here at Goodwin's Game Design Sessions. Programming is, by its very nature, the heart of the creation of any video game, and it's a core part of what our learners do. The software we teach learners to use, as we've stated previously, is called RPG Maker MV. At the time we acquired it, it was the latest in a series of softwares designed to help people create classic JRPG, Japanese roleplay games, in the style of the original Final Fantasy games, Pokemon games, and other games of that era. The key advantages to using this software? There is no coding knowledge required to make a playable game, nor do learners need to know how to create art or music assets, as all of these are provided in the box, so to speak. Our first game, Underhull, made significant use of these inbuilt assets to great effect, combined with original assets created by learners and staff. To talk a little bit more about how programming has worked on Isolated Nightmares, I'm going to pass over to Ash, one of the team of staff working on the project.
Isolated Nightmares is a project that we've worked on since April of 2020, right in the heart of the first lockdown. As a project, it's presented a whole host of unique challenges that make it both exciting and difficult to work on. The first thing that has to come when deciding to make a game is deciding precisely what kind of game you're choosing to make. Although RPG Maker is, by its very definition, designed primarily to make RPGs, there have been a whole host of other games made using the software. Narrative-focused story games, horror experiences, and more besides. However, we chose to retain the RPG genre, focusing on characters who fill roles, or classes, within a group or party. This presents challenges not only narratively, but in terms of formulating the way in which these characters interact with each other. It didn't take very long for us as a group to decide in our formation to work on a JRPG style of game like the traditional ones that we have an affinity for. Final Fantasies in particular were a particular inspiration to our initial designs. From that point, we set about building a cast of characters that would fit in our theme of isolation, a task that has seen us rework and retool characters as the project has expanded. Our main character for Chapter 1, our knight, from a gameplay perspective, is a defensively minded protector that also provides respectable damage of his own. But he came to represent anxiety in isolation. He eventually started blurring lines between a protector and supporter in combat to someone who, in this fantasy world, would require and need support from his compatriots to deal with the world around him. Other traditional character archetypes ended up changing in a similar way. What we originally envisaged as a pure healer type of character there to fix wounds and treat people who had been downed in combat eventually formed into our concept of the bard, someone who, in dealing with a lot of negative emotions, instead of simply healing physical wounds, though is capable of doing that, would be there to help provide characters a way to heal emotional wounds and reduce panic. This approach to character design has allowed us to create people who sit on the fringes of traditional RPG archetypes. This doesn't detract from their abilities to fill the roles needed in RPGs, however. The bard is able to heal all sorts of ailments with magical instruments and quick wit, and the knight is an extremely effective defender, even with his personal misgivings and apprehension. Our ranger and paladin, who we look forward to sharing with you as the project nears completion, are equally versatile attackers despite their clear differences in fighting style. With our characters designed and the frameworks of their classes clearly in mind, we step into the technical side of our project. How do we make our characters feel distinct in combat? What abilities do they have? What skills are they better in than any of their teammates? This led to a lot of decisions that felt very natural. The knight, as a defensive type of character, should have high magical defense, high physical defense, and a lot of health points to help him use his support abilities while taking damage. The bard, who, despite being physically frail, would have high magical stats to empower his healing, as well as give him some offensive capabilities with a small amount of damaging spells. On top of this, the paladin and ranger characters would have different types of attacking capabilities, both magical and physical, to help the player make different decisions in combat. An important piece of balancing our characters is to make them all feel integral to the player, avoiding overlapping too many skills and styles in combat, while also providing enough options so that no character seems to underperform. Weighing these factors in the development of skills and the range of attributes means that changes occur frequently, but permits us the most creativity as a team. Obviously, balancing applies to a degree of other subjects as well, such as enemies. Though most enemies will serve only to slow down players, it's important that if they're built for that they don't ever feel too overbearing. There'll be enemies that we won't want to feel too weak and provide memorable encounters. And crucially, there'll be many enemies that we want to provide a genuine challenge to players. And for those to feel credible, they can't be too easy to defeat, or they can't feel unbeatable either. On top of all of that is a plethora of items to balance, consumables, weapons and armour for people to use, to keep in line with level progression and balance against each other, as well as having some that might even break the balance a little bit to be hard-won equipment for players to really earn. Of course, it's all well and good having characters, classes and enemies, but where will the game happen if you don't make a map to go with it? Fortunately, mapping an RPG Maker can be as simple as drawing the various roads and buildings using a simple map designer, but there's also a little more to it than that. RPG Maker comes with great functionality and variety that we've used to build the maps that make up our world. It's allowed for a great degree of depth and verticality to all the maps that we make. With it, we've created giant ravines, villages hidden in dense woodlands, and a good old-fashioned dungeon. Most importantly though, it supports the ability for our artistic learners to create their own assets to be used as the foundation of the world we're making. Now of course, working in isolation means that we often have different members of our team working on separate pieces of the game in isolation. No pun intended there. And we're required to bring all that together to create the footage and the gameplay you're seeing now. Well, I'm sure no one really needs reminding at this point. The last year has certainly placed a toll on people's capacity to work and communicate with others, and a collaborative effort like this has certainly been no exception. Integrating learners into the project has not been without its issues, unfortunately. The ability for people to collect the software and learn has been more troublesome than usual. In another world, we'd have been able to deliver sessions face to face, help people come to terms with what they're using, what they're learning in a much more efficient way, which is unfortunately we've been deprived of. And as well for us in the programming team, one of the issues we've been coming to terms with is the inability for us all to be working on the same version of the game at any given time. A great deal of time and effort is spent, even without work being done, just making sure we're all on as much of an updated version of the game as each other. These challenges and more are some of the things that our learners, and staff as well, have dealt with, if we say so ourselves, brilliantly over the course of the year we've spent developing this game. Hopefully, when we release the demo for the game, you'll all agree.